The pursuit of happiness. What is it? How do we achieve it? Well, we're going to talk about that today on the Freedom Off the Pulpit podcast. Welcome to the Freedom Off the Pulpit podcast, where faith, culture, and lifestyle will collide harmoniously. I am your host, Minister Frankie. And before we get on with the show on today, which is the pursuit of happiness, what is it? How do we achieve it? I want to double back just a little bit on basically the hot topic of these past couple of weeks, which has been the halftime Super Bowl. Last episode, I talked about it extensively, I would say, and I hit a couple of points last week. But this week, I was listening to one of my favorite influencers right now, one of my favorite YouTubers. His name is Wall Street Trapper. And on his show, his right-hand man is Jose. His Robin is Jose. We can say that. And Jose has a son that is around 19, 20 years old. And they were speaking about certain things on the show. If you want to listen to the show, it was episode 131. And what was interesting was that they brought up a young lady. I forgot her name. They called her the Trapper of the Week. She was a millionaire by her early teens. But then they started getting into other things about Black history and the things that happened in the South, so on and so forth. And one of the things that they mentioned, that they asked this young man was, did he know about Black Wall Street? This young man said no. And another thing that they brought up was, do you know what 40 acres and a mule represents? Do you know what that is? And he didn't know. And to me, that kind of floored me, because we're speaking about a 19-year-old kid, 19, 20, meaning that he graduated high school already. And he didn't know what was 40 acres and a mule, or what it signified, or the meaning behind it. And I remember learning that stuff in high school. So it made me wonder, number one, what are they teaching our children in high school, or just in school in general, number one? And number two, what are they teaching these kids about Black history? Because I heard about 40 acres and a mule. And if you don't know what that means, then I will suggest for you, instead of me giving you the answer right now, I know what it is, but instead of me giving you the answer, how about you look it up? Look up what 40 acres and a mule is, or what did it mean? What was the promises behind it? Look that up. And while you're looking that up, look up the period of Reconstruction. Look at that period. In June, you have a day off. High schoolers, public schoolers, let me just say that. Public schoolers have a day off in June, Juneteenth, which is Juneteenth. If you don't know what that is, look it up. If you don't know what Juneteenth stands for, if you don't know where Juneteenth came from, I suggest to look it up. Now, I am going to admit, I didn't learn about Juneteenth in high school, none whatsoever. But as I mentioned in the last episode, one thing that I have learned, one thing that I have realized, one thing that I have come to grips with is the fact that the race problem in this country, even though I was not born in this country, because of how I look, because of my skin tone, because of my color, I inherited those race problems. I was watching a documentary today, which is a great documentary. I recommend everyone to watch it. As a matter of fact, I will go out on a limb and say anything that Henry Louis Gates does, to me, is a recommendation for you to go watch. His documentaries are great, shot great, produced great. But the last documentary that I just finished watching from him was The Great Migration. Great documentary. Great 4-part documentary. And on today, I watched the 4th part. In the 4th part, they had a Nigerian business owner. And one of the things that came up in the discussion was, aren't you afraid that you're going to be treated the same way as the Black Americans that are here? And his wife was the one that answered the question, and she was the one that was basically saying, you know what? He had to learn that in spite of where he came from, because he was born in Nigeria, because of his color, he was going to be treated the same way as Black Americans have been treated in this country. He has 3 businesses, 3 restaurants. So this man has some money. He is not living in the poverty line. He is not lower class. I would say upper middle class, because he has 3 businesses. But one thing that she mentioned that's eye-opening was the fact that it didn't matter, that he needed to learn that it didn't matter how much money he had if he got pulled over. The only thing that was going to matter was his color. His status would not matter in that moment, because he could say, yeah, I'm not like them, as she was mentioning in the documentary. Oh, no, I'm not like them. But that's not what's going to be shown by your skin color. As soon as they look at your skin color, right away, they're going to paint a picture of who you are because of the past history or how people with our skin color has been portrayed. But I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, because we can truthfully speak on that and see how we have tried to reshape that or change that mold, right? So that is a conversation for another day, because I do have an opinion on that. But it's interesting. I would suggest for you to go watch this documentary called The Great Migration. I would suggest for you to go watch anything that, once again, Henry Louis Gates does. The Great Migration, the history of the Black church, Reconstruction. Reconstruction is very, very powerful. Go learn the history of Black Wall Street. That in itself it's very interesting. So go do a little bit of digging. And if you're a teenager, if you're in your early 20s, late teens, yes, I would suggest for you to go and watch these documentaries. Go and learn about these things, because once again, you might not have been born in those times. You might be 3rd generation removed, but I can guarantee you, you will face those problems today. So learn about it. Learn about those issues. So on today's episode, the pursuit of happiness. We're going to talk about the pursuit of happiness and what it is. How do I achieve it? How do we define happiness? And to be honest with you guys, I truthfully believe that this question is so profound. And the reason that I believe that it's so profound is because the definition of happiness is going to vary with each person, with each individual. It's truthfully going to vary. So we can get a vast, or we can get an array of answers when it comes to pursuing, achieving happiness. And I'm going to be honest with you, there are going to be some questions that may rise up during this episode that I might not have the answer to. There might be some questions that might come up on the fly that I'm going to be stuck on, and that's okay. And the reason that I say that's okay is because I'm not going to sit here or stand here and pretend that I have the answer to everything. There are some things in our lives that we just don't have an answer to at this moment, or we are going to need a group of people to come together to come into an agreement or to come to a concise answer. And there are so many things in our life that happens that we are still wondering. And I believe that one of those things is happiness. The definition of it. When are we happy? Is content being the same as happiness? I'm going to tell you right now, no. But I will answer that question later on in the episode. And another thing that I want to be is I want to be very candid. And I know that in my community of Christians, Pentecostal, charismatics, being candid or being open, sometimes it's frowned upon. Because it is believed that if you are too open and if you share too much of yourself, they can use that against you. But in my opinion, I like to be open enough to show people that I am still a beggar, pointing you to where the bread is. I like to open up enough. And the reason I say enough is because I am not going to let you into every intimate room that I have in my life. That's impossible. I truthfully believe that there are certain circles, parameters that you should have that only certain people should have access to. You just don't open up to just anybody. You truthfully have to be guarded for certain things in your life, because I believe that there are certain people that cannot fully accept who you are. I truthfully believe that. They just won't accept who you are and how God has made you. But I like to be open enough to show people that, you know what? I'm not perfect. You know what? I'm still in my journey, in my walk to reach that quote unquote perfection. And as I stated before, as one of my favorite rappers said, Andy Minium, I'm just a beggar pointing you to where the bread is. We are going to open up a bit, or we are going to open up enough to be able to get on to this topic of pursuit of happiness. And you know what? It's interestingly enough, one of my favorite movies is The Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith. That movie makes me cry. I'm not going to lie. You see, that's me opening up right now to you that, yes, there are movies that make me cry. I don't have a problem with crying. I don't have a problem expressing my feelings. I don't. I am an emotional person. I am an emotional man. I have no problem and no issue expressing my emotions. There are movies, yes, that make me cry. I love the nostalgia feeling of music, of movies and places. That's me. That's how I move. But I have a question, right? Because one of the questions that come up, and once again, hopefully we can get through this and answer it, is happiness essential to life? And therefore essential to life with God? That's interesting. Is happiness a constitutive, and I repeat that again, is happiness a constitutive aspect of Christian faith and living? And the definition of constitutive, if you don't know what it is, trust me, it's okay. I have to look it up. Is having the power to establish or give organized existence to something. So is happiness a constitutive aspect of Christian faith and living? Is it required for you, especially if you're speaking here on the Freedom Off the Pulpit podcast? Is it required for you to live a happy life walking with God? That's a very interesting question. All right, so before we go any further, if these past episodes have been any blessing to you, please at this moment, take a quick minute to share this information, to share and like. If you're watching through Spotify, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching through Apple Music, really quick, just a quick like and a share if this episode and previous episodes have been a blessing to you. It will help your boy out so immensely, so greatly, and I will be truthfully appreciative of that. Quick like, quick share. Okay, enough of that. Now, before we go any further, right, So before we go any further, before we can speak about the pursuit of happiness, before we can know if it's something that we have to live with, we have to define what is happiness, right? Or we have to clarify what makes us happy. So, what is your definition of happiness? What is your definition of happiness? I'll say that again. What is your definition of happiness? Because as we said before, to define happiness, it can differ for every individual. And that's the reason why this question can lead us down a rabbit hole. Because how do you define happiness? Or what makes you happy? Is it money? Is it family? Is it success? Is it achieving goals? How do you define this happiness? What makes you happy? Now, while doing research for this episode, I ran into an article, and this article was written by Jonathan Huggins, and he is a college chaplain at Berry College in Rome. Right, so I want to give him credit for the snippet that I'm about to read. And it says in this manner: we might begin to answer these questions by first asking, what is happiness? In contemporary culture, happiness seems to be all about evanescent, quickly passing, or effervescent, vivacious, or enthusiastic feelings. Think of the song, and he mentioned, think of the song Happy by Pharrell. It's a kind of inner peace, sense of contentment, or maybe even excitement, or a feeling of general well-being. One often hears people giving advice such as, just do whatever makes you happy, or I just want you to be happy. And one of the things that I have a problem with was just do whatever makes you happy. And the reason I have a problem with that is because there was this show on Netflix called Mindhunter, a great show. And it was a show that depicted how the specific branch of the CIA started, a specific branch that studied serial killers and how it began. And some of the things that the serial killers were doing brought them joy, but those things were wicked. Those things were bad. You already know what a serial killer does. He kills in a series. They have a pattern. And these people, once again, brand new branch of the CIA, they were called to examine them. What makes them tick? What makes them like this? And some of these things made them happy. So to tell somebody, just do whatever makes you happy, to me, I'm like, I don't know about that. Because what if a person, it's okay, or what makes them happy, it's seeing somebody trip and fall, or seeing somebody fall off a chair. And I'm thinking of very benign things, right? Very, very simple things. What if what makes you happy, it's something like seeing somebody electrocuted, right? So just do whatever makes you happy. To me, that's a problem. That is a huge problem. So once again, how do we dive into this? How do we get into this? How do we go about pursuing happiness in our lives, right? So we truthfully have to define what is happiness. Now, since I can't speak for anyone else but myself, I'm going to describe what makes me happy and what I pursue to make me happy, right? Now, you can turn around and say, well, your view is biased, right? I know what you're going to say. You are a Christian, right? So your view might be a little biased. And that's where I will push back a little bit, because I don't think that is bias. And I truthfully don't think what I'm going to say is subjective. What I'm going to say, I truthfully believe is objective. And I'll make sense of that. Why do I believe that it's objective and not subjective? Well, I am going to give you the reasons for that. Now, my pursuit of happiness for me starts with a mindset, right? I truthfully believe that my pursuit of happiness, and you can vet this even for yourself, right? So my pursuit of happiness starts with the mindset. And the reason for that is because what will make me happy most likely will make you happy, right? So to me, that is determined by mindset. Your mindset is going to determine what makes you happy. But let's take this a little further, right? Let's take this a little further. Now, for me, the reason I say that is a mindset is because in my life, the same place or the same exact place that at one season I did not want to be in, now that same place has become my safe haven. That same place I run to and you cannot get me out of it. And that place is my home. That place is my apartment. Same place, but different sense of happiness. Same exact place. But in one season, I didn't want to be home. But now, in this season that I'm in, you just can't get me out of it. Same exact location, different feelings, different mindset. And that's the reason why I said that it begins with your mindset. You see, there was a season that I just didn't want to come home. It was tumultuous for me. But now there's no way that you can get me out of it, right? No way that you can get me out of my apartment. Now, I'm not saying that I'm a hermit, right? I'm not saying that you can't get me out. I will tell you that I myself am an ambivert. What is an ambivert? An ambivert is a person that's a mixture of an extrovert and an introvert, right? There are times where I just want to be out. I live in New York City. I love being in the city. I love being in Manhattan. I just love it. And I love the sceneries. There's a couple of spots in New York City, and not only in Manhattan, but in Queens and in Brooklyn that I just love being there. I love the view. Love the views in these specific spots. That's my extroverted side. But then there are times where I honestly don't want to be bothered. Or there are times when I don't want to talk, and I just want to be left alone. And I just want to be by myself. That's my introverted. So I have those two sides. And yes, I'm an ambivert. There are times where you can engage me in conversations and we'll talk for hours. There are times where I just need to shut down. Like, I don't want to talk no more. I just want to just leave me alone, as Cinderella said. And when I'm saying Cinderella, I'm talking about Brandy Cinderella. Just leave me alone in my own little corner, in my own little chair. That's where I want to be, right? So I have those two aspects. So I'm not going to say that I don't enjoy going outside, because I do, but my home, being in my home right now is like, man, it's my safe haven. It's my cave. My home is my physical adulam. My home is my physical adulam, and I love it. It is very hard to get me out of my home. But once again, in one season, it wasn't like that. My mindset had to change. So the base for my mindset, what made that shift? The base for my mindset is God. Not was, is, because he continues to be the base, the substratum that sustains me. The foundation that sustains me is God. Now, he is the base. But I would say that the continued relationship and the shift of the relationship also helped me with my mindset first, because it was my mindset that needed to shift. So I would say that to truly achieve happiness, for me to get there first, we must go through some dark moments and dark times in our lives, because then that will help us basically care more for our happiness. That will basically would allow us to cherish more our happiness, going through some moments that are tumultuous, going through some moments that are hard and tough. Because once again, how can I appreciate now my happiness if I never had a season of lack thereof? For me to be able to appreciate what I have now, what I have gained, there had to be a season where I didn't have it. For me now to be appreciative of the same. Now, establishing God as the base and our relationship with God as the sustainment of our lives will allow us to be content in whatever situation we might be going through. So we're putting this together, right? We just finished saying that for us to be able to truly achieve happiness, we must go through some tough times, dark times, tumultuous times in our lives. But yet, when we set God as the base of our lives and He becomes our sustainment, it will allow us now to be content in whatever situation we might be going through. Why? Because being content, as we mentioned before, being content is not the same as being happy. Being content, it is not the same as being happy. Now, how can we prove that? We can prove that through the scriptures. Philippians chapter 4, verses 11 through 13. And it reads in this manner. Now that I am speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. Keyword there is content. In whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. And this is where everybody's favorite verse comes in. I can do all things through Him who strengthens me. And I love this verse. Once I truly learned how to see this verse, a lot of people quote this verse as in future tense. But this verse is not supposed to be quoted in future tense, because if we look at it within its context, the Apostle Paul is saying that I am content in whatever situation God puts me through. I've been through the good. I've been through the bad. I have had plenty. I have had abundance. But there have been times that I've been in need. But guess what? Well, all those times, right, I can do all things through God that gives me strength. He is speaking of what he went through. The reason I can say I can do all things through Christ that gives me strength, or that strengthens me, is because of what I have already gone through, what he has sustained me through. And the things that he has sustained me through, I am not happy, content. Content in them. You're following me now. So content is not the same thing as happy. So I had to learn, before I was able to reach this happiness, I had to learn to be content in the situation that I was in the storm that I was going through. Now, I want to quote St. Augustine and also Thomas Aquinas, right? And they said this: St. Augustine of Hippo and Thomas Aquinas agreed with Aristotle, the Greek philosopher, Hellenistic philosopher, that true Christian biblical happiness is connected with goodness or virtue and wisdom. What they add to the Hellenistic philosopher is that the triune God is the source of all goodness and wisdom. Therefore, the source of all happiness, one cannot be happy without God. One cannot be truly happy without God. Let me add that in there. One cannot truly be happy without God. You can achieve a level of happiness, but true happiness you can have without God. But why not? Well, we're going to speak on that further in the episode. So in this season in my life, right, I'm not saying that I didn't have a relationship with God. So please, do not mistake what I'm saying. I had a relationship with God. But because of the season that I'm in, because of the season that I was traversing through, I had to get to know him differently than how I knew him before. There was a new level in our relationship that we have to reach, or that we had to reach, because I never went through this with you. And when I say with you, I mean in God. I never went through what I was going through with him. So I needed to get to know him different. There was a different level of relationship, a different level of ginosko that we needed to know each other, right? So in this season, and once again, not saying that I didn't have a relationship with God, but it was different now because I truly had to rely on him now that I was isolated with a purpose. In the season that I was in the season that I was traversing, I was isolated with a purpose. And that purpose was for me to see him in a different way. It's a one-on-one now. It's just him and I now. It's just you and God right now. And when you're by yourself with someone, you're going to get to know them different, because you're going to have to get to know them in the season that you're in, or in the situation that you're in at this moment. One of the things that I've heard about married couple that I heard my pastor say is, hey, don't drive your mother crazy, because when you guys leave the house, I'm the one that's going to have to deal with her. It's just going to be her and I, right? And that, to me, speaks volumes. Because after the kids are gone, if you have children, your relationship with your spouse revolves around the fact that there's 4 of you, or there's 5 of you, or 6, or 7 in the house. It revolves around the family. Once everybody's gone, your relationship with your spouse is going to change, because there's no longer any other distraction happening around to take away the fact that now you got to deal with this person 24/7. Now you're isolated with this person. Now it's just a one-on-one with this person. So God isolated me. It was just him and I in that season. So in that season, I truly had to lean on him. And lean on him did I do. Because I wasn't happy. I was content in the situation that I was in. I wasn't happy yet. I had joy, and that joy was in spurts. But because of the season that I was in, I really wasn't truly happy. But I leaned on my God. I leaned on Jehovah. I leaned on Yahweh throughout this season, knowing that he will get me through, knowing that I'm going to be all right. I'm going to be okay. Because in the beginning of the season, in the beginning of my storm, I didn't know if I was going to make it. As a matter of fact, I was blaming God. Man, why am I going through this? Why do I have to go through this, God? I've been faithful to you. I've been one of your faithful servants. I've done everything you asked me to do. Why am I going through this? That was in the beginning of the season. But then I learned, you know what? Even though that I'm in need, as the Apostle Paul just finished mentioning in the 4th chapter of the book of Philippians, right now I had abundance, but now I'm in need. I was high, but now I'm low. And even in that low, I learned that I'm going to be all right, because I needed to shift my mindset. I needed to shift how I was thinking. And once that shift began to happen, I didn't know when things were going to be better. But guess what? I am content in the fact that my God has me in his arms. So once I was able to know him in this new season, I was able to add a different layer to our relationship. And with that layer or new level, I was able to learn how to be content in my situation. And funny enough, right, that contentment led to a reassurance that even though this is new, I will be able to overcome it and also be able to find peace in it. So my pursuit of happiness, before I even got to the level of happiness, I needed to change my mindset. And changing my mindset allowed me to be content in the situation. And allowing me to be content in the situation gave me an assurance that in spite of things not being good right now, that in spite of going through the storm, that in spite of being in the middle of this sea, I'm going to be all right. I'm going to be okay. My God has me. Yeah, I was so sure of that. That you know what? God, I may have mucked up. I may have messed up. But I know that you got me. You hold my world in your hand, as Israel Houghton would say. You hold my world in your hand. So I was able to lean on my God so much that even though I wasn't happy, but guess what? I was content. I was even keel throughout the situation. But in that contentment, I had a reassurance that my God was going to see me through. And that reassurance gave me peace. And that was so key. Finding peace in the middle of your storm. My God. Being peaceful in the middle of your trials. Being peaceful in the middle of your tumultuous season. Finding that peace that surpasses all understanding, to me, is very key. Now, this peace that came from this reassurance led me to be happy because I wasn't suffering anymore, going through the growing pains of my new season. I'm used to the pain now. I'm okay in it. I'm content. I haven't gotten to the other side, but guess what? I am content in where I am. And since I'm content in where I am, I have a reassurance that everything is going to be all right. And this reassurance has given me peace. And not because I have peace, gosh darn it, I can be happy. You know what? Now I can sing the Pharrell song. Now I'm happy. I'm happy. And once I reached that level, I was able to broaden my horizon when it comes to my relationship with God. And to me, that has been splendid. My relationship with God nowadays is completely different than what it was 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago. Because now I have this peace. Now I can say, even though, and yes, I'm not in the storm anymore. Thank God. I'm no longer in the storm. I have gone through the other side, but the peace that I have came from that, came from going through it and finally getting over. So this peace has led to a different level, a different horizon, being able to see things in different manners, in different ways. And to me, it is so beautiful. And I encourage you at this moment to be able to get to that point that you see God, maybe not in a new level, maybe not in a new layer, but in a new horizon. Meaning that you're able to expand your views, be able to expand your point of view on not just certain topics or certain issues, but just in life in general. To me, that is so powerful that I was able to see God now in a new horizon. Now, I'm not going to mention the things that I discovered in this new horizon. I will mention a couple of them. I can't mention them all. I'm not going to mention them all. I just mention a few of them. But it's so beautiful. And once again, the reason I don't want to mention them is because I don't want to influence you on what you should be looking for. Because no one influenced me of what I was looking. I had to find it on my own. So I encourage you right now to find it on your own. And yes, I am going to mention a couple of them. Hopefully they don't influence you in any way, shape, or form, because I would love for you to find it on your own. Right? So I encourage you at this moment to truly find your levels and your new horizons that are going to lead you to, number one, to be content in your situation, or content in the direction that God is leading you to, which will then lead you to a reassurance. And that reassurance would then lead you to a place of peace. And in that place of peace is going to lead you to your happiness. Right? Happiness. So what is happiness? What is happiness? I truly believe that this question is going to yield so many different answers and so many different avenues of exploration for so many people. But I truthfully believe that you won't be able to reach true happiness without knowing the will of God for your life. Because a lot of people to this day are asking themselves that same question. What is my purpose here on earth? Why was I created for? Why am I here? And the happiness that I have is because I'm able to answer that question now. I'm able to answer, why am I here in this particular season? What God has for me, I can answer that for myself. So you yourself have to find out what is the will of God for your life. Now, I don't think we ask ourselves this question often. I really don't. And the question is, what is happiness? What is happiness? I truthfully believe that we don't ask ourselves this question enough, because it sounds selfish. What makes me happy? Right? It sounds selfish in a way. But why not ask yourself that? Why not ask yourself, you know what really makes me happy? I am so fixated on making everyone else happy. I am so focused on making everyone else happy. But I have to ask you once again, what is going to happen to you when it gets to your season of isolation? Because each and every one of us, whether you believe in God or not, are going to find yourself in a season of isolation. You're going to find yourself there when it's just you and your thoughts. And if you don't believe in God, you're going to drive yourself mad. You're going to drive yourself crazy. So I advise you to believe in the maker of this universe, the one that did everything by speaking it into existence. He is the one that did everything in ex nihilo, meaning he made something out of nothing. And if you are a believer in God, this is going to be the perfect time for you to add a layer, because it's going to happen. It's going to happen. You are going to get to a season of isolation when it's just you and God. So you need to ask yourself, what makes me happy? What is happiness to you? See, I truly don't think that is a selfish question. I truly don't think so. See, especially if you're walking in the will of God. If you're walking in the will of God, I think you should ask I think that you should ask yourself that question. What truly makes me happy? What makes me happy? And that right there is going to blow your mind, because what is the will of God? And is the will of God that he has planned out for me, is that going to make me happy? Maybe we'll talk about that in another episode. Who knows? But the will of God and your happiness, does it truly have to align? Great question. Answer that for yourself. So my journey in this season is leading me to learn more about the history of the United States. That's my journey in this season. Something that really brings joy to my life is history. I've always been a history guy. I love history. But right now in this season, what's truly bringing joy into my life is learning more about the history of the United States. And not just the history of Black America, but the history starting from the early 1600s until today. Learning about that, which honestly, that journey then has led me to learn more about the history of my home country, Panama, right? Because one of the things that I've learned was that I have Jamaican blood in me, because my great-grandfather came from Jamaica to work on the canal when it was owned by, or being developed by, the French. But then the French, for some reason, couldn't do it anymore. And then the United States came and took over, and they were the one that finished the canal. Now, my great-grandfather, after working in the canal, had to go back, but a lot of Jamaicans stayed in Panama. They made their dwelling in Panama. My great-grandfather was one of them. And that's where my history starts, in my country. So that journey, or the journey that I'm in right now, has led me to learn more about that. But coupled with that, put that together, right? How did my great-grandfather ended up in Jamaica? So that has led me to learn a little bit more about the diaspora through the transatlantic slave trade, and learning about that a little more, and learning a little bit more about colonization, and learning a little bit more about the trans-Saharan or the trans-Arabic slave trade. So that has pushed me. In this season, that has been my journey. Now, how does that help me out, right, as a Christian? Well, if you put that together, right, put that together with learning more about the traditions and culture of the Bible, because that's another thing that I'm loving to learn now in this season. In this season, I'm learning more about the biblical traditions and cultures of the time, and why the books, especially the New Testament books, were written in that manner. Putting all of that together, coupling all of that together, has led me down a path of being able to have specific conversations with certain people and sharing this knowledge with young people, with people that are around me, to be able to understand a little bit more of our history, and also to be able to preach the gospel to them. Because as some Black Americans think that Christianity is a white man's religion, but truly learning the traditions and the culture of the scriptures of the Bible, and seeing how it spread, and learning once again about the diaspora, so on and so forth, we can truthfully say that Christianity is not a white man's religion. But that has been my journey, right? That has been my journey, and truthfully, that makes me happy. And the reason I can say that it makes me happy is because I don't need the cosign of anyone else to be content in what I'm doing. I am happy learning these things on my own. I am happy researching these things on my own because I truthfully believe this is the path that my God has led me down on. And that to me has been my pursuit of happiness, knowing that the will of God has led me down this path to be able to speak to people from different cultures and different backgrounds about the biblical narrative and how it traveled throughout history. And this journey has been a wild one. This journey has been a crazy one for me, but it's been my pursuit of happiness. It is my journey, and this journey makes me happy. So the question is, what is your journey? What is your pursuit of happiness? Thank you for joining me in this episode of Freedom Off the Pulpit podcast. If you have made it this far, I would love for you to give it a like at this moment. Share it with whomever you think that this is going to bless. So thank you for joining once again on this episode of Freedom Off the Pulpit podcast. Signing off on today is your brother, Minister Frankie. And I just want to tell you, God bless you, God keep you, and have a wonderful, wonderful, and blessed day.